Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
All right, let's keep this momentum going here. It's our fourth hour of this morning show, and if you missed any of the first 3 hours, please subscribe to our podcast, download it, so you won't miss a darn thing. Coming up in 30 minutes, Tim Carney penned a column at the Washington Examiner about how Fairfax Commonwealth Attorney Steve Descano refuses to clean up the county with regard to brothels openly operating. And there's a whole lot of exploitation, sex trafficking going on there, but Steve Descano is A-OK with it. Tim Carney coming up in 30 minutes. I'm Larry O'Connor. That's Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
And it's a Thursday at 8 o'clock, so we've got KT McFarland joining us. KT, good morning. Good to talk with you as always.
It's always a pleasure to be with the two of you.
So where to begin? I'm sure you saw the scandal of the New York Times posting a photograph on their cover amplifying the plight of starving children in Gaza. But, of course, what ended up being the truth of the matter is that they cropped out a perfectly healthy, well-fed child standing in the same room as this so-called starving child. The starving child, it turns out, actually had a pre-existing medical condition that was way more complicated than any concern about food for children. But as is usual with the New York Times, the lie is heard around the world multiple times before the truth can put its keffiyeh on. And so now there's a lot of pressure on Israel. You've got France now acknowledging the Palestinian state, so-called. The UK is threatening to do the same. KT, it almost seems like these countries and the New York Times want to reward Hamas for the October 7th massacre by giving them exactly what they wanted.
You think seems like? Look, Europe has always been anti-Semitic. Okay? Europe is anti-Semitic. It's anti-Israel. Anybody who's traveled here, I was in London like a month ago, and I was stunned at the absolute Jew hatred that is there. And just from average people. This is not, radical Muslim extremists from parts of West London. No, this is like average people. They hate Israel. They hate the Jews. They think the Palestinians are noble people. They understand why Hamas has done what it's done. They sympathize with Hamas. It's just, it's an upside-down world. And the New York Times, in conjunction with some of the European leaders, the French President Macron, others recognizing the Palestinian state. There's no Palestinian state. Who's Palestine? Where are the people? Right. What are their borders? Who are the leaders? There is no cohesive Palestinian anything, and yet they want a virtue signal. Now, part of it is because of, again, it's the anti-Semitism. Part of it, though, is virtue signaling to the percentage of their population, which has now become quite powerful thanks to their open border policy. And they now have a very increasingly large Muslim, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel part of their population that they're appealing to for electoral purposes.
Yeah, KTO, just going back to this sort of the reporting on this starving child. The New York Times put this out, got millions of retweets and attention on this story, and then the correction was put in a separate section that only has, something like a couple thousand subscribers. The U.S. media, this isn't just the New York Times, and you've addressed the sort of anti-Semitism that's at play there. But what is the answer for this? Is it just alternative media? There just seems to be this constant narrative that Israel is doing such harm to the so-called Palestinian people. How do you reach, there obviously people on the right, they come to us, or they come to, Daily Wire or other alternative media sources. But there are persuadable Democrats. There are reasonable Democrats still out there. If there's a few. How do we switch that so that their news sources aren't so warped and sending such a to me a very dangerous anti-Semitic, anti-Jew, anti-Israel message?
Joy, this is the hard part, because as a conservative, you don't want suppression of free speech. Right. But on the other hand, you see that how it's being twisted. I come down on the side of, okay, let's cut the NPR funding. Let's do all the things so at least we're not paying for them to do their malign activities. But when it comes to the case of journalist outlets, New York Times, Washington Post, name your channel, the fact that they're spewing lies intentionally, whether it's the Russia hoax, whether it's the Jew hatred, whether it's the anti-Israel, pro-Hamas position, I think that time will tell. And for the sake of freedom of speech, I'm willing to let them, go on spewing their nonsense, knowing, as you look at now the numbers and the finances, they're going broke.
Yeah, that's a healthy attitude.
The New York Times, fleeing. Where the only part of the New York Times that's growing is its cooking section. Or its crossword puzzle. Nobody's reading the New York Times.
It is very good, by the way, the cooking section.
Yeah, good recipes
there. Yeah, it is.
There.
Actually, it is good. I use it too. But the Washington Post, the people, even reporters, are fleeing because.
Yeah.
So I think at the end of the day, the truth will out. I've always been a believer that if you let enough voices speak, if you let everybody speak, the people themselves are actually having an enormous amount of common sense, and they're ditching those places in staggering rapid numbers. The collapse of the legacy media is an unwritten story, but when we look back a year or two from now, when we think, the Washington Post and the New York Times are going to come begging for some kind of subsidies, it's a real telling thing that people voted with their pocketbooks.
KT, let's pivot over to trade, specifically the talks that are going on with China. Of course, President Trump engineered a stunning achievement with the EU trade deal. And then immediately, Treasury Secretary Bessent took up negotiations, high-level negotiations with China in Switzerland. It was in Geneva. He's now back briefing the president. What do you think the end game here is? I keep hearing that they're trying to set up a monumental deal and then a state visit where President Trump will go to Beijing and sign with his counterpart Xi Jinping. Do you expect that to happen?
Yes. And here's why. President Trump understood one fundamental thing that politicians kind of glazed over, which is that other countries need to sell their goods into the American market a whole lot more than we needed to buy their stuff. We have alternatives. We can buy stuff from India instead of China. So every country needs to sell their goods into the United States or they go broke. 10 years ago, that was not the case. Europe had a growing economy. Europe was buying things. China was thought to be a consumer society. None of it has worked out for a whole lot of reasons. The Americans are the only people with the money and the willingness to spend that money. And now that we have economic growth, which is stunning so much of the world, we have 3% economic growth really on the promise of President Trump's advances. And once you get the tax cuts that kick in, the energy resources that kick in, and the trade deals, we're going to be off to the races. We're going to have economic growth the world hasn't experienced in decades. And so as a result of that, if you're China, if you're India, if you're the United Kingdom, whatever your country is, you need a trade deal with the United States. And so, yes, I think at the end of the day, China may be the last one to do it, but at the end of the day, we will have a trade deal, and it will be on our terms. It'll be to our great advantage.
Real fast, were you concerned about the decision to not allow the president of Taiwan to be in New York en route to meetings in Latin America? That many people thought that was sort of an indication that we were acquiescing to China in the midst of these trade talks.
I would say Donald Trump takes the long term. Am I upset about it? No, because I think at the end of the day it works out. If that's a sticking point in the middle of these very sensitive negotiations, I'm less concerned than the final outcome, which is the United States is going to be economically stronger. China's going to be in a position where it's not going to make as much trouble. And in the long run, it's probably better for the prospects for the country independence of Taiwan if this goes on.
Thank you, KT. Always a good conversation on a Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you.
It is 8:15.